It was supposed to be his moment of vindication, the day Prince Harry finally stood tall against the British tabloids and exposed their secrets to the world. He walked into the High Court in London expecting to be the hero of his own story, armed with righteous anger and the belief that the world was on his side. But within hours, that narrative didn't just crack, it shattered. Instead of a triumphant takedown of the press, the world witnessed a royal unraveling in real time. Harry didn't just lose his composure. He lost control of the room, nearly breaking down in tears, while the judge, the one man he needed to impress publicly, scolded him not once, but 3 separate times. What happened inside those walls wasn't just a bad day in court. It was a systematic dismantling of a prince's credibility. While Harry wept about the misery of his life, his wife was 5,000 miles away, seemingly unbothered, posting lifestyle updates that painted a very different picture. From the humiliation of being told to stop arguing with the judge to the shocking revelations about his legal team backing away, this is the true story of how a multi-million-dollar lawsuit turned into a public relations nightmare. And the details that came out under oath reveal that this situation goes far deeper and is far darker than anyone realized. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted the moment Harry took the stand, and it wasn't in his favor. This wasn't a television interview with a friendly host nodding along to his grievances. This was a cross-examination by some of the sharpest legal minds in the UK, presided over by Justice Matthew Nicklin, a man who deals in facts, not feelings. Almost immediately, Harry tried to play by his own rules. Instead of answering the questions put to him by the defense lawyer Anthony White, Harry began to debate. He pushed back, he deflected, and he tried to argue the law with the lawyers. It was a strategy that might work in a PR statement, but in a court of law, it is a disaster. The tension hit a breaking point rapidly. The judge, initially trying to be patient, had to intervene. He told Harry quite clearly that he was there to answer questions, not to argue the case that was his lawyer's job. But Harry didn't stop. It happened a second time, with the judge's tone becoming sharper, the frustration in the room palpable. By the third time, Harry tried to argue about what qualifies as a journalistic source. Justice Nicklin shut it down completely. It was a humiliating spectacle, a member of the royal family being treated like an unruly schoolboy because he refused to accept the authority of the court. But that wasn't the whole story. The reason for Harry's combativeness wasn't just arrogance, it was panic. The defense had pulled a strategic masterstroke the day before, cutting their opening arguments short and forcing Harry onto the stand a full day earlier than he had prepared for. He looked rattled, uneasy, and completely out of his depth. He wasn't settled, and the defense team knew it. They capitalized on his emotional state, and Harry walked right into the trap, debating the judge instead of delivering the evidence. And as bad as that looked, the things he actually said under oath were about to make things much worse. As the questioning continued, Harry's testimony took a bizarre and confusing turn that left legal analysts baffled. He began to get emotional, his voice cracking as he told the court that the tabloids had made his wife's life an absolute misery. He spoke about the pain, the intrusion, and the suffering Meghan had endured. On the surface, it sounds like a protective husband defending his spouse. But there was a massive, glaring problem with this emotional display. Meghan Markle has absolutely nothing to do with this lawsuit. The case Harry is fighting focuses on alleged phone hacking and illegal information gathering that took place between 2001 and 2013. That is the hard timeline. Harry didn't even meet Meghan until the summer of 2016. She wasn't there for the alleged crimes. She wasn't in his life, she wasn't in his phone, and she wasn't the subject of the articles in question. Yet Harry tried to make her the centerpiece of his testimony. It raised a massive red flag about his motivations. Why bring her up in a case that predates her existence in his world by years? Critics and legal experts began to speculate immediately. Was this a calculated attempt to use Meghan as an emotional shield because the actual evidence regarding the 2001 to 2013 era was weak? By dragging her name into a trial about his past, Harry wasn't strengthening his legal argument. He was exposing the fact that he might be fighting a proxy war for present-day grievances rather than past injustices. It made the entire lawsuit look less like a quest for truth and more like a venting session for current frustrations. And while he was crying about her misery in London, the reality of what she was doing at that exact moment told a completely contradictory story. While Harry stood alone in the dock, isolated and facing aggressive questioning, the misery he described seemed to be missing from one key location, Montecito, California. Reports surfaced that while her husband was enduring what was arguably the most stressful week of his life, Meghan was active on Instagram showcasing a life of luxury, calm, and commercial success. She was posting images of their sprawling mansion, the pool, and the sunny California lifestyle, a stark, jarring contrast to the gray, tense atmosphere of the London High Court. The optics were disastrous. This is a couple that has built their entire post-royal brand on the concept of being a united front, salt and pepper, always moving together. Yet when the heat was turned up to its highest setting, Harry was alone. There was no support in the gallery, no hand to hold during the breaks. Just Harry flailing against a legal system he didn't understand, while his wife was 5,000 miles away managing her social media engagement. The comment sections on these posts exploded with people asking the obvious question, if she is the source of his misery, and the reason for this fight, why is she seemingly ignoring the battle? It fed into a growing narrative that Harry is fighting these battles to prove his worth to her, while she remains detached from the fallout. The juxtaposition of Harry weeping in court about how destroyed they are while Meghan posts curated content about their beautiful life created a disconnect that the public couldn't ignore. It made Harry look less like a partner and more like a soldier sent to the front lines while the general stays safe at headquarters. But the emotional confusion didn't stop with Meghan. It took an even darker turn when the subject of the trial forced Harry to drag up his past loves. Perhaps the most uncomfortable aspect of the trial was the resurrection of Harry's relationship with Chelsea Davy. Because the timeline is strictly 2001 to 2013, the woman at the center of the privacy invasion claims isn't Meghan, it's Chelsea. She was the one chased by photographers. She was the one whose voicemails were allegedly intercepted. And she was the one who ultimately walked away from Harry because she couldn't handle the royal circus. Chelsea has since moved on. She's married, has children, runs a successful business, and has maintained a dignified silence for over a decade. Yet, in his pursuit of justice, Harry admitted to the court that he had called Chelsea the night before his testimony. He dragged her back into the emotional turmoil she had worked so hard to escape. He spoke about her in court with a level of emotion and regret that raised eyebrows, a heavy, lingering sadness about what could have been. He painted a picture of a relationship destroyed by the press, which may be true, but by focusing so heavily on her, he inadvertently highlighted the contrast between the woman who wanted privacy and got it by leaving, and the woman he is with now, who seeks the spotlight. People watching the trial found this deeply unfair to Chelsea. She didn't ask to be a character in Harry's legal drama in 2026. She didn't sign up for her name to be splashed across the headlines again. It seemed hypocritical for Harry to scream about the sanctity of privacy while invading the peace of his ex-girlfriend to bolster his own case. It showed a lack of awareness about how his crusade for truth was causing collateral damage to the people he claimed to care about. And speaking of hypocrisy, the defense team was about to drop a bomb that would turn Harry's own words against him in the most damaging way possible. The most lethal weapon the Daily Mail's lawyers had wasn't a secret witness or a hidden document. It was Harry's own book Spare. Harry stood in the witness box and stated with a straight face, "I have never believed that my life is open season to be commercialized by these people." He argued that his private life was sacred and that no one had the right to sell stories about him. The silence that followed that statement was deafening, because the entire world knows that Harry made millions of dollars doing exactly that. The defense team didn't have to work hard to dismantle this argument. They simply pointed to the record. Harry released a 400-page memoir detailing the most intimate private moments of his life and the lives of his family. He published text messages between Meghan and Kate about bridesmaid dresses. He wrote about losing his virginity. He described private family fights and medical details. He signed a massive deal with Netflix to air a documentary that took cameras inside his home. He sat down with Oprah for a global interview. He has commercialized every square inch of his existence. For him to stand in a court of law and claim that he opposes the commercialization of his private life looked like sheer delusion. It wasn't just a contradiction. It was a fundamental collapse of his entire moral argument. The public reaction was swift and brutal. You cannot sell your privacy to the highest bidder and then sue the press for writing about you. It cemented the idea that Harry doesn't actually want privacy. He wants censorship. He wants to be the only one allowed to monetize his life, and he wants the power to silence anyone else who tries to tell a different version of the story. But the problems weren't just about his image. They were about the evidence itself. In a court of law, what you feel is irrelevant. What you can prove is everything. And this is where Harry's case began to crumble structurally. Under cross-examination, it became painfully clear that Harry didn't have the smoking gun everyone expected. When asked for proof that a specific article was the result of phone hacking, Harry repeatedly used phrases like, "I believe," or "it seems suspicious." He relied on the assumption that because the information was private, it must have been stolen. But belief is not evidence, and the defense was ready to prove it. The lawyers for the newspaper group methodically went through the articles Harry was complaining about. They showed that in many cases, the information hadn't been hacked, it had been leaked by people in Harry's own circle, or released in official palace statements that Harry had simply forgotten about. They produced emails and records suggesting that the stories came from legitimate journalistic sources, or even from his friends who were chatting to reporters. This was devastating. It suggested that the paranoid narrative Harry has lived with for years, that he is being bugged and tracked every second, might be exaggerated or at least not the cause of every story. This lack of concrete proof is likely why rumors began swirling that his legal team was backing away. Lawyers have a duty to the court. They cannot knowingly present a case that is built on falsehoods or pure speculation. If Harry is insisting on a narrative that the evidence doesn't support, his lawyers are put in an impossible position. Reports that key members of his legal team were considering resigning or were backing away fast suggest that they saw the writing on the wall. They realized that Harry's desire to fight was outpacing his actual ammunition. And if they lose, the cost will be more than just pride. Beyond the humiliation and the emotional toll, there is a cold, hard number hanging over this trial: $38 million. That is the estimated total of legal costs and potential damages if Harry loses this battle and the others he is fighting. This isn't just about paying his own lawyers, who charge exorbitant hourly rates. Under British law, the loser often has to pay the winner's legal fees. Associated Newspapers has hired the best, most expensive defense money can buy. If Harry loses, he's footing the bill for the very people he hates. Financial experts and royal commentators have pointed out that Harry's liquidity is a mystery. Sure, the Netflix and book deals were huge, but the lifestyle in Montecito is incredibly expensive. Security, travel, the mortgage, the staff, it burns through cash at an alarming rate. And with the Spotify deal collapsed and the Netflix future uncertain, with reports of shows being canceled or underperforming, a $30 million legal hit could be catastrophic. It could wipe out a significant chunk of the freedom fund he and Meghan earned by leaving the royal family. This high-stakes gambling adds a layer of desperation to his court performance. He needs this win. He needs the vindication to prove that his crusade is valid, but he also likely needs the settlement money to keep the machine running. This pressure might explain why he was so emotional, so combative, and so on edge. He knows that he has pushed all his chips into the middle of the table, and the cards he is holding, suspicion, emotion, and memory, might not be strong enough to beat the royal flush of documentation held by the defense. As the doors of the High Court closed, the image of Prince Harry that emerged was not one of a conquering hero, but of a man lost in a maze of his own making. He went to London seeking justice, but he found himself trapped in a web of contradictions. He demanded privacy while selling his secrets. He demanded accountability while refusing to answer the judge's questions. He cried for his wife's misery while she lived her best life across the ocean. This trial has exposed the fragile foundation of the Sussex brand. It has shown that you cannot rewrite history just because you have a platform. In the brutal, fact-based arena of a courtroom, narratives don't matter, proof does. And as Harry argues with judges and fights with lawyers, the world is watching a prince who seems to be fighting a war that ended years ago against enemies that might not even exist in the way he thinks they do. The question now isn't just whether he will win or lose this case. The question is what will be left of his reputation when the dust settles. If the court rules against him, If the judge decides that his claims are baseless and his testimony was unreliable, it will be the final nail in the coffin of his credibility. He will be seen not as a victim of the press, but as a man who tried to censor the truth and failed. And that is a verdict that no amount of Netflix documentaries can overturn. What do you think? Is Harry brave for standing up to the system, or has he completely lost touch with reality? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on this collapsing house of cards, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. You won't want to miss what happens next.